April 14th, 1918. Château-Thierry, 56 miles northeast of Paris, France. General Lieutenant Erich Ludendorff stood in the operations room of German High Command, studying reconnaissance reports with growing disbelief. His hand traced the rail lines from French ports toward the front, lines that now carried American divisions at rates that shouldn't be possible. 4 American divisions had detrained in the last week alone. The 1st Division, 2nd Division, 26th Division, 42nd Division, each at nearly full strength, equipped with artillery, transport, supplies. Ludendorff had commanded armies across 2 fronts for 4 years. He understood logistics, maritime warfare, submarine capabilities. The Holzendorf Memorandum of December 1916 had calculated with mathematical precision that unrestricted U-boat warfare would prevent meaningful American intervention. Admiral Henning von Holzendorff's staff had estimated that Germany's 111 operational U-boats could sink 600,000 tons of Allied shipping monthly, forcing Britain to negotiate peace within 5 months and limiting American troop deployments to a maximum of 300,000 men before the submarine blockade made transatlantic transport prohibitively costly. What Ludendorff didn't know, what no German staff officer would understand until American divisions appeared across the Western Front in overwhelming numbers, was that the United States had created a maritime transportation system on an industrial scale that rendered German submarine calculations obsolete, a system transporting not 300,000 American soldiers, but 2 million, arriving not in isolated, vulnerable ships, but in massive, protected convoys that German U-boats could neither locate nor significantly damage, fundamentally transforming the Western Front's strategic balance before German planners recognized the scope of their miscalculation. German naval staff officers weren't guessing when they drafted the December 1916 memorandum authorizing unrestricted submarine warfare. They were calculating based on proven submarine effectiveness, known Allied shipping capacity, and established convoy vulnerability. Admiral Henning von Holzendorff, chief of the German naval staff, assembled his best operational analysts to produce a document intended to answer one question. Could Germany's U-boat fleet force Britain out of the war before American intervention became militarily significant? The memorandum's mathematics appeared sound. Britain imported 10,750,000 tons of goods annually to sustain its war economy and feed its population. Germany operated 111 U-boats in December 1916, with 49 capable of Atlantic operations. Historical data from limited submarine warfare showed each operational U-boat sank an average of 12,200 tons monthly when operating under prize rules requiring warning and crew safety. Unrestricted warfare, attacking without warning, targeting all vessels including neutrals in designated war zones, would increase effectiveness by eliminating time-consuming surface protocols. Holzendorff's staff calculated unrestricted U-boats would sink 600,000 tons of shipping monthly, 40% more than restricted operations achieved. The strategic conclusion followed from these numbers. Sustaining 600,000 monthly tons sunk for 5 months would eliminate 3 million tons of British shipping, 28% of Britain's merchant fleet, forcing Britain to negotiate peace by August 1917, before starvation and economic collapse made continued war impossible. Regarding American intervention, the memorandum acknowledged that unrestricted submarine warfare targeting neutral vessels would likely bring the United States into the war. But Holzendorff's assessment dismissed American military potential with confidence born from analyzing American military infrastructure. The United States Army in 1916 numbered 108,000 regulars, smaller than Belgium's pre-war army. American military transport capacity consisted of a merchant marine depleted by British wartime purchasing and lacking troop ships designed for mass deployment. The memorandum calculated that even with maximum effort, American forces would require 8 to 12 months to organize, train, and equip divisions for European warfare. Atlantic crossings averaged 12 to 14 days eastbound. Troop ships required conversion, naval escort, and return voyages. German submarines operating in designated war zones around British and French ports would force American transports into longer southern routes or face torpedo attack. The final calculation: before U-boat attrition made transatlantic transport prohibitively dangerous, the United States might deploy 300,000 troops to France, roughly 15 divisions at American organizational strength. This force, arriving piecemeal over 12 to 18 months while U-boats destroyed Allied shipping faster than replacement construction, would prove insufficient to offset Germany's Eastern Front divisions redeploying after Russia's collapse. Holzendorf presented these calculations to Kaiser Wilhelm II on January 9, 1917, recommending immediate unrestricted submarine warfare. The Kaiser approved. On February 1, 1917, Germany announced unrestricted U-boat operations in designated Atlantic zones. What German naval planners fundamentally misunderstood was that their calculations assumed maritime transportation would remain artisanal, individual ships making independent crossings, each vessel a separate target requiring separate submarine engagement. The coming American transport system wouldn't operate on these assumptions. It would industrialize ocean transportation itself, creating convoy operations on scales that rendered individual submarine effectiveness statistically insignificant against the aggregate flow of American military power across the Atlantic. While German submarines prowled Atlantic shipping lanes through 1917, American military planners confronted the logistical problem Holzendorf's memorandum assumed was unsolvable. How do you transport an entire army across 3,000 miles of ocean threatened by submarines capable of sinking ships faster than you could build them? The answer emerged not from military tradition, but from industrial management principles. Major General George W. Goethals, who had commanded construction of the Panama Canal, received appointment as acting quartermaster general in December 1917 with responsibility for organizing American overseas transport. Goethals approached troop transport as an industrial production problem. Ships were production units, ports were factories, convoys were production batches, requiring synchronized scheduling. What mattered wasn't individual ship capability, but total system throughput, tons and troops delivered per month regardless of losses. Goethals began by commandeering every suitable vessel. The U.S. Shipping Board Emergency Fleet Corporation, created by Congress in April 1917, seized 91 German ships interned in American ports when war was declared. 730,000 tons of shipping, including modern passenger liners like Vaterland, renamed Leviathan, America, and George Washington. These vessels, designed for luxury Atlantic crossings, converted to troop ships carrying 8,000 to 14,000 soldiers per voyage, 10 times their peacetime passenger capacity through barracks construction and cargo holds and elimination of crew amenities. But German ships provided only initial capacity. Goethals needed sustained mass production of troop ships. The Emergency Fleet Corporation contracted with American shipyards for mass-produced standardized cargo vessels using assembly line construction techniques. The Hog Island shipyard outside Philadelphia employed 34,000 workers operating 50 building ways simultaneously. Each Hog Islander standardized at 7,500 tons, constructed from prefabricated steel sections. By November 1918, American shipyards completed vessels faster than German U-boats could sink them. 3 million tons launched in 1918, exceeding all U-boat sinking from February 1917 through armistice. The convoy system transformed individual ship vulnerability into collective protection. British Royal Navy Captain Reginald Henderson developed the tactical doctrine after May 1917, when German U-boats sank 596,629 tons of British shipping in a single month. The war's peak U-boat effectiveness Henderson recognized that submarines' primary advantage, stealth, became liability against concentrated shipping. A single submarine could stalk and sink isolated merchant ships indefinitely. That same submarine, encountering a convoy of 40 ships, escorted by destroyers, faced impossible mathematics, exposing its position to attack one vessel while 39 others steamed past, with destroyer escorts converging on any torpedo wake. American troop convoys implemented Henderson's doctrine at unprecedented scale. Each convoy consisted of 8 to 15 troop ships, escorted by destroyers, cruisers, and subchasers, varying routes, varying speeds, faster ships 14 to 16 knots, slower 10 to 12 knots, varying schedules that prevented German submarines from establishing predictable patrol patterns. The cruiser Seattle escorted 35 separate convoys across the Atlantic without losing a single troop ship. The converted liner Leviathan made 10 round-trip crossings, carrying 96,800, 4 troops total, more soldiers than Grant commanded at Appomattox, without U-boat attack, despite being Germany's highest-value target. Port operations industrialized the embarkation process. Hoboken, New Jersey, served as the primary American embarkation port, processing troops through a standardized system Goethals personally designed. Troop trains arrived on synchronized schedules, matching ship departure times. Soldiers moved through medical inspection, equipment issue, and gangway boarding in assembly line sequence. 12,000 men loaded per ship in 8 to 12 hours. The process repeated daily through 1918. By July 1918, Hoboken embarked 306,000 troops in a single month. French ports received these convoys with equal industrial precision. Brest, Saint-Nazaire, and Bordeaux expanded their dock facilities specifically for American arrivals. At Saint-Nazaire, American engineers constructed a concrete shipyard, employing 12,000 workers who assembled standardized warehouses, barracks, and rail connections. By August 1918, Saint-Nazaire processed 40,000 arriving American soldiers weekly, each man moving from ship to French rail system within 24 hours. The statistics revealed systematic success that German calculations hadn't anticipated. From June 1917 through November 1918, American transports completed 1,962 individual voyages carrying troops and cargo. German U-boats sank 2 troopships during this period. The Tuscania went down February 5, 1918, with 166 American casualties from 2,235 troops aboard. Casualty rate 7.4%. With 2,069 soldiers rescued by British destroyers, the Moldavia sank May 23, 1918, with 56 American casualties from 1,600 aboard. Total American troop losses to U-boat attack: 222 soldiers, 0.01% of total transported. By contrast, German planners had calculated U-boat effectiveness would produce 15 to 20% shipping losses, making transatlantic deployment unsustainable. The actual loss rate proved 1,500 times lower than German calculations predicted. This miscalculation revealed fundamental misunderstanding of how industrial systems defeated individual weapons through aggregate capacity and distributed vulnerability. What Ludendorff observed in April 1918 was the operational manifestation of systematic transportation success. American divisions arrived in France not as isolated reinforcements but as continuous industrial output, soldiers flowing from American training camps through Atlantic convoys to French rail systems with machine-like regularity that battlefield casualties couldn't interrupt. The 1st Division, Big Red 1, landed at Saint-Nazaire on June 26, 1917, 16,000 soldiers of the American Expeditionary Forces Vanguard. Commanded by Major General William L. Sibert, these troops represented traditional deployment, single division moving independently, requiring months of French training before combat readiness. By October 1917, the 1st Division entered frontline trenches in the quiet Somerville sector, becoming the first American division in combat positions. But by January 1918, the deployment pattern transformed from individual divisions to mass production. The 26th Division arrived. The 2nd Division followed. The 42nd Rainbow Division detrained. Each division numbered 28,000 soldiers, double the size of French or British divisions, with organic artillery, engineers, medical units, and supply trains, making them self-sustaining combat formations. American divisions didn't integrate piecemeal into Allied armies. They arrived as complete organizations requiring only tactical positioning. The acceleration continued through spring 1918. In March 1918, 84,000 American soldiers reached France. In April, 117,000. In May, 244,000. More troops than Holzendorf calculated would arrive during the entire war. June brought 276,000. July peaked at 306,000 troops arriving in a single month. 10,000 soldiers per day, stepping off ships at Brest and Saint-Nazaire, more than the entire American Expeditionary Force that existed 9 months earlier. These numbers represented systematic transportation superiority that German staff calculations hadn't conceived possible. The United States operated 45 troopships by November 1918, plus chartered British vessels adding additional capacity. These ships maintained continuous Atlantic crossings, eastbound with troops, westbound with wounded or empty, turnaround time in port minimized through industrial scheduling. The Leviathan alone transported nearly 100,000 soldiers. The George Washington carried 48,000. Each voyage moved division-strength forces, while Holzendorf's calculations assumed small-scale independent shipping vulnerable to submarine interdiction. German operations confronted this American flood during their spring offensives. Operation Michael, beginning March 21, 1918, intended as Germany's final effort to win the war before American strength became decisive. Ludendorff commanded 192 divisions for the offensive, every available German division, including forces redeployed from the Eastern Front after Russia's collapse. The offensive achieved initial success, penetrating 40 miles into British lines, threatening Amiens. But American arrivals outpaced German offensive capacity. At Cantigny on May 28, 1918, the 1st Division attacked German positions near Montdidier, capturing the village in the American Expeditionary Force's first independent offensive operation. The 1st Division held Cantigny against 7 German counterattacks over 3 days, demonstrating that American divisions could conduct sustained combat operations. At Château-Thierry in June 1918, the 2nd and 3rd Divisions stopped German advances toward Paris at the Marne River. The 2nd Division's 4th Marine Brigade attacked into Belleau Wood on June 6th, beginning 3 weeks of combat that cleared German positions from forested terrain the Germans considered impregnable. By July 1918, 26 American divisions operated in France, 748,000 American combat soldiers, with additional troops arriving daily. General John J. Pershing, commanding the American Expeditionary Force, insisted on forming an independent American army rather than integrating divisions into French or British command, a demand possible only because American divisions arrived in sufficient numbers to constitute an autonomous force. On August 10, 1918, the U.S. First Army officially formed with Pershing commanding 550,000 American soldiers, organized as a strategic formation capable of independent operations. The Meuse-Argonne Offensive, beginning September 26, 1918, demonstrated American military mass in practice. Pershing committed 600,000 American soldiers to break German defensive positions between the Meuse River and Argonne Forest, a 24-mile front where German forces had constructed fortifications for 4 years. The offensive lasted 47 days, advanced 10 miles through German defenses, and suffered 122,000 American casualties, but demonstrated that American forces could sustain offensive operations through casualty rates that would force smaller armies to halt. What made these operations strategically decisive wasn't individual American tactical performance. American divisions were inexperienced compared to veteran French or British units. What mattered was aggregate capacity. German armies bled themselves against Allied defenses for 4 years, reducing experienced divisions to hollow formations sustained by inadequate replacements. American divisions arrived fresh, at full strength, backed by continuous replacement flow from American training camps. By October 1918, American forces numbered 1,900,000 soldiers in France, with 200,000 additional troops arriving monthly. German forces, exhausted by spring offensive casualties and facing Spanish influenza epidemic that killed more soldiers than combat, couldn't sustain operations against this continuously refreshed American mass. German recognition of the Holzendorf Memorandum's failure occurred gradually through 1918, as American divisions accumulated faster than German offensives could eliminate Allied divisions. Initial German intelligence reports dismissed early American arrivals as insignificant. Several divisions scattered across French sectors, inadequately trained, unlikely to affect strategic balance. But by April 1918, German staff officers tracking American deployment recognized the pattern wasn't episodic reinforcement, but systematic mass production. Ludendorff's April 17, 1918 operational directive acknowledged the threat with characteristic precision. The arrival of American reinforcements has proceeded at an unanticipated rate. American divisions now present across the front must be considered when calculating Allied replacement capacity. This represented significant doctrinal shift. German planning since January 1917 assumed American military potential remained theoretical troops that might arrive eventually, but not in time or sufficient numbers to affect Germany's spring offensives. By April 1918, Ludendorff explicitly factored American strength into operational calculations. The recognition deepened through summer 1918. German intelligence estimated 1,200,000 American troops in France by August, 4 times Holzendorff's maximum calculation. Post-war German official history, Der Weltkrieg, 1914 to 1918, acknowledged the strategic implications directly. The arrival of American forces in strength and number exceeding all German calculations fundamentally altered the strategic situation. German operations through 1918 occurred against continuously increasing Allied strength, while German replacement capacity declined. The Americans provided fresh divisions in quantity that made Allied numerical superiority insurmountable. Admiral Reinhard Scheer, commanding the German High Seas Fleet, authored a 1920 assessment examining the submarine campaign's strategic failure. His analysis confronted Holzendorff's miscalculation without euphemism. Unrestricted U-boat warfare achieved significant tonnage destruction, but failed to prevent American military deployment on decisive scale. The convoy system, implemented with unexpected effectiveness by British and American naval forces, reduced submarine efficiency while American shipbuilding replaced losses faster than U-boats created them. Most critically, we fail to recognize that submarine warfare against merchant shipping, however effective tactically, could not interdict military convoys specifically protected by concentration of Allied naval power. We sank merchant tonnage. The Americans transported armies. The mathematical comparison revealed systemic miscalculation. Holzendorff calculated 300,000 maximum American deployment before submarine attrition made transport unsustainable. Actual American deployment reached 2,042,000 troops by November 1918, 681% more than German calculations predicted possible. German U-boats sank 5,282 Allied vessels from February 1917 through November 1918, totaling 11,153,506 tons. Yet, Allied shipbuilding produced 12,564,000 tons during the same period, 1,410,494 tons more than submarines destroyed. The submarine campaign achieved tactical success, individual U-boats sinking impressive tonnage, while failing strategic objectives because tonnage sunk couldn't exceed tonnage produced, and military convoys remained effectively immune to submarine interdiction. The human cost of this strategic miscalculation became apparent in post-war German assessments. Germany lost 178 U-boats and 5,132 submarine crew during the war, 40% of all U-boat personnel killed, the highest casualty rate of any German service branch. This sacrifice achieved impressive individual results. Each U-boat sank average 62,650 tons before destruction, but couldn't prevent American armies from reaching France in decisive strength. Colonel Wilhelm Deist, German Army staff officer, wrote in his 1922 memoir, 4 Years on the Western Front, "We calculated based on submarine effectiveness against isolated merchant vessels. We failed to calculate that the Americans would industrialize transportation itself, treating convoys as mass production rather than individual ships. By the time we recognized this error, American divisions appeared across our front in numbers, making further offensive operations impossible." The pattern repeated German World War I experience across multiple domains. Tactical excellence, producing strategic failure because industrial capacity overwhelmed tactical effectiveness. German submarines were individually superior to Allied anti-submarine forces, better crews, better tactics, technological advantages in torpedo and diving capabilities. But when Allied navies concentrated hundreds of escorts protecting thousands of cargo vessels and troopships, individual submarine excellence became statistically insignificant against aggregate shipping flow. One U-boat might sink one freighter, 40 other freighters steamed past. The submarine couldn't engage them all before destroyers converged. This same dynamic defined the American deployment pattern. German spring offensives achieved tactical success, penetrating Allied lines, capturing territory, inflicting casualties. But American troopships continued arriving regardless of battlefield results. German armies might eliminate Allied divisions faster than Allied training camps could replace them. But American training camps produced divisions faster than German offensives could eliminate them, and American transportation guaranteed those divisions reached France before German advances captured channel ports. By November 1918, when Germany signed the armistice, the Western Front reflected the strategic reality Holzendorf's calculations failed to predict. The American Expeditionary Force numbered 2,042,000 soldiers organized in 42 divisions operating as an independent army. These forces represented just the initial deployment wave. An additional 1,800,000 American soldiers occupied training camps in France or the United States, prepared for 1919 operations that armistice made unnecessary. The United States Selective Service had registered 24 million men for potential military service, industrial mobilization of human resources on scale no previous war imagined. The transportation statistics validated industrial system superiority over individual weapons effectiveness. American transports completed 1,962 Atlantic crossings through submarine-infested waters. U-boats attacked American military convoys 16 times, sinking 2 troopships with 222 casualties, 0.01% of total American forces transported. The convoy system transformed submarine warfare from strategic threat to operational nuisance. German U-boats continued sinking isolated merchant ships through 1918, But merchant shipping losses couldn't prevent American military deployment because military convoys received concentrated escort protection that rendered submarine attack prohibitively dangerous and minimally effective. The port statistics revealed transportation system capacity. Hoboken processed 1,533,000 American soldiers through embarkation, average 8,500 troops daily from April through November 1918. French ports received these soldiers with equal efficiency. Saint-Nazaire alone processed 792,000 American arrivals, constructing port facilities, expanding berth capacity from 12 to 32 simultaneous ships. The American logistics base in France employed 485,000 support troops, operating railroads, warehouses, hospitals, and supply depots, infrastructure supporting continuous combat operations, independent of French logistical assistance. Post-war American Army official history, United States Army in the World War, 1917 to 1919, quantified the systematic achievement. The American Expeditionary Force transported 2,086,000 troops and 7,500,000 tons of supplies across the Atlantic from April 1917 to November 1918. This operation represented the largest sustained military transportation effort in history, achieved against active submarine opposition through systematic application of convoy protection and industrial shipping production. The success validated principles of mass production and systematic organization applied to military logistics, demonstrating that industrial capacity properly organized could overcome tactical weapons effectiveness regardless of enemy technological capability. General Pershing's final report to Secretary of War Newton Baker, submitted November 20, 1918, connected tactical results to strategic transportation success. The American Army's contribution to Allied victory derived directly from our capacity to transport and sustain military forces overseas on unprecedented scale. German miscalculation regarding American deployment capacity created strategic conditions enabling decisive military operations. When German commanders confronted American divisions appearing continuously across the Western Front in numbers exceeding their maximum estimates, they recognized that Germany's military position had become untenable regardless of tactical battlefield performance. The broader lesson extended beyond specific American deployment success. The industrial warfare that defined World War I on land, artillery, machine guns, chemical weapons, tanks, extended to maritime operations through convoy system implementation and systematic shipbuilding. Individual weapons or platforms, however tactically effective, couldn't overcome industrial capacity to produce, protect, and deploy military force at aggregate scales, rendering individual effectiveness statistically negligible. German submarines sank impressive tonnage. American shipyards produced more tonnage. German armies won tactical battles. American training camps produced more divisions. Industrial capacity determined strategic outcomes, regardless of tactical excellence. The Holzendorf Memorandum represented sophisticated operational analysis, producing fundamentally flawed strategic conclusions because it calculated based on assumptions that industrial organization would remain artisanal. The memorandum assumed ships would sail independently, making each vessel a discrete target. It assumed shipbuilding couldn't replace submarine sinking. It assumed military transportation would follow commercial shipping patterns. These assumptions proved catastrophically wrong because they failed to anticipate systematic industrial organization applied to every element of military logistics. What arrived in France during 1918 wasn't simply 2 million American soldiers. What arrived was industrial warfare's logical extension, mass production of military power, standardized transport systems, continuous replacement capacity, and aggregate force flows that individual weapons couldn't meaningfully interrupt. The Germans had calculated maximum American deployment based on existing maritime transportation patterns. The Americans industrialized maritime transportation itself, creating capacity German calculations couldn't anticipate and submarine warfare couldn't interdict. By armistice, the Western Front demonstrated industrial warfare's ultimate lesson, the nation that could mobilize industrial capacity most effectively, producing weapons, supplies, and soldiers faster than enemies could destroy them. Transporting those resources where needed, despite enemy interdiction attempts, would prevail regardless of tactical battlefield performance. German armies were tactically excellent. German submarines were individually effective. But German industrial capacity couldn't sustain operations against Allied industrial systems, producing material and transporting troops faster than German forces could eliminate them. Captain Hermann Bauer, German submarine operations commander, captured this recognition in his 1921 memoir, Das Unterseeboot. We fought the war we prepared to fight, attacking individual merchant ships with submarines optimized for solitary operations. The Allies fought an industrial war we didn't anticipate, organizing convoys as mass production, treating ocean transportation as factory output, protecting military convoys with concentrated naval power that made submarine attacks suicidal. We calculated submarine effectiveness. They industrialized transportation itself. We won tactical engagements. They won the strategic mathematics. The American soldiers appearing across the Western Front in impossible numbers represented not superior tactics, but superior industrial organization applied to warfare's fundamental problem, getting military power where it's needed faster than enemies can prevent it. The 2 million American soldiers who reached France didn't win World War I through superior combat performance. They won by arriving at all, by proving that industrial organization could defeat individual weapons systems, that systematic transportation could overcome submarine warfare, that mass production of military force exceeded tactical destruction capacity. The Germans calculated maximum possible American deployment. The Americans industrialized deployment itself. That difference between calculating within existing systems and creating entirely new systems determined the war's outcome and revealed industrial warfare's essential character. Aggregate capacity defeats individual effectiveness when industrial organization reaches sufficient scale and systematic sophistication.